Kamala Harris, dressed in a refined yet understated suit, entered the private jet cabin with a faint smile. After weeks of relentless meetings and political engagements, she had been eagerly anticipating this getaway to the Maldives, a tropical haven where she could unwind and recharge. The jet's interior radiated opulence, featuring luxurious leather seats, soft ambient lighting, and thoughtfully curated amenities reminiscent of a five-star hotel on the move. She placed her bag in the overhead compartment and settled into her seat, savoring a rare moment of calm away from the pressures of politics. A flight attendant with neatly styled blonde hair, Emily, stepped into the cabin, greeting passengers with a warm smile and polite demeanor. Yet, when her gaze fell on Kamala, a fleeting hesitation crossed her face, and her smile dimmed slightly, replaced by an unreadable expression. Kamala, ever perceptive, noticed the subtle change but responded with a gentle smile and a polite nod. Emily glanced down at her passenger list, her eyes lingering on Kamala's name before she abruptly turned and retreated toward the galley. Kamala decided not to dwell on the incident, removed her shoes, reclined in her seat, and opened a book she had been eager to finish. Before she could turn a page, Kamala sensed someone's gaze from across the aisle. A young woman in her early 30s, with long black hair, watched her with a curious yet friendly expression. Kamala smiled, and the woman nodded briefly before focusing on her laptop. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Emily returned to the cabin, avoiding Kamala's gaze while tending to other passengers with evident care. When she finally approached Kamala's seat, she placed a glass of water on the tray with a slight clink, saying nothing. Kamala raised an eyebrow, picked up the glass, and offered a gracious smile. "Thank you, that's very thoughtful of you," she said. Emily responded with an enigmatic smile, quickly retreating without a word. Kamala couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. While hostility wasn't unfamiliar, this incident felt different. An hour into the flight, she sipped her water and tried to redirect her thoughts, but the unease lingered. Across the aisle, the young woman from earlier, sensing Kamala's discomfort, stood and approached her. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "I couldn't help but notice that flight attendant doesn't seem to like you." Kamala gave a polite but guarded smile. "She's just doing her job." Sarah glanced around nervously. "I overheard her talking about you with another attendant near the galley." It sounded concerning. Kamala's expression remained calm, but her eyes sharpened. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll keep that in mind." As Sarah returned to her seat, Kamala leaned back, feigning relaxation, though her mind was racing. Emily's behavior seemed deliberate, and Sarah's warning only heightened her awareness. When Kamala glanced toward the galley, she caught Emily's fleeting, cold gaze. It wasn't the casual glance of a flight attendant but something sharper and more calculating. Kamala tried to focus on her book, but the oppressive discomfort persisted. Emily soon returned to the cabin, expertly balancing a tray of drinks, her demeanor cheerful as she offered beverages to other passengers. However, when she reached Kamala, her smile faltered. Setting the glass on Kamala's tray with a firm clink, Emily's tone turned curt. "Here's your drink." Kamala met Emily's gaze, her expression composed. "Thank you," she replied, her polite smile masking the questions swirling in her mind. Emily offered no response, simply arching an eyebrow before moving on. A few passengers glanced curiously in their direction, but no one intervened. Across the aisle, Sarah watched the exchange with evident concern. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Kamala couldn't help but wonder if this was more than just personal bias. Her instincts told her to stay calm and alert. Whatever was happening, she would uncover it in time. Forward disapproval was written clearly on her face. In a low voice, Sarah asked Kamala, "Did you notice her strange attitude? She's been acting like that since we boarded." Kamala set her glass down, keeping her tone steady. "Perhaps it's just been a long workday," she said, though even she didn't fully believe her own words. Sarah shook her head slightly but leaned back, her watchful eyes tracking Emily's movements. As a human rights lawyer, Sarah was well practiced in recognizing inequities, and she couldn't ignore the stark difference in how Emily treated Kamala compared to the other passengers. Not long after, Emily returned, this time without the tray. She walked directly toward Kamala's seat and stopped abruptly, crossing her arms. "Are you sure you booked this flight properly?" she asked, her tone cold and unmistakably hostile. Her sharp words drew the attention of nearby passengers, who turned their heads in curiosity mixed with discomfort. Kamala looked up, her demeanor calm and measured. "I booked through my office. My documents were checked and confirmed when I boarded. If there's anything you'd like to verify, please feel free." Emily raised an eyebrow, dissatisfaction etched on her face. "I just want to make sure everyone on this flight is where they're supposed to be." Kamala carefully placed her book on the tray table, her gaze steady and unwavering. "If you have a specific concern, please address it directly." Emily's lips twisted into a faint, mocking smile, but she said nothing more. Turning abruptly, she briefly glanced at Sarah before vanishing back into the galley. Sarah stood and stepped closer to Kamala. In a hushed voice, she asked, "Do you need my help? I don't want you to face this alone." Kamala smiled appreciatively. "Thank you, but I'll be fine. I'd like to see what happens next." Before returning to her seat, Sarah discreetly slipped a small note onto Kamala's tray table. Kamala unfolded it to find an urgent message: "Be careful. I think she's up to something." Folding the note into her palm, Kamala sat quietly, reflecting. What had begun as subtle tension had escalated into overt hostility. Was it simply prejudice against her, or was there a deeper reason behind Emily's behavior? From the galley, muffled voices reached her ears. Though the words were indistinct, snippets like "not safe," "do something," and "report" stood out. Kamala tilted her head slightly, maintaining a neutral expression while her mind worked quickly. Across the aisle, Sarah leaned closer and whispered, "Did you hear that? I think they're targeting you." Kamala nodded faintly. "I heard. Let's see how this plays out." Sarah sat back, her tense posture betraying her readiness to intervene if necessary. Emily re-emerged, her demeanor now serious and unyielding. She stopped near Kamala's seat, holding a passenger manifest. "I need to see your booking documents again to verify they match our records." Kamala looked up, her calm gaze cutting through the charged atmosphere. "I already presented my documents at boarding. If there's a problem, I suggest you raise it with the captain or a flight supervisor." Emily hesitated, momentarily thrown by Kamala's composed response. "We just want to ensure everyone is where they're supposed to be. Safety is our priority," she replied, her tone strained. Kamala's expression remained unflinching. "I can assure you, I pose no threat to the safety of this flight." Emily didn't reply. Turning sharply, she left the cabin in silence. The air grew heavier as passengers exchanged uneasy glances but stayed quiet. Sarah leaned toward Kamala again, murmuring, "Something's definitely wrong. Be cautious." Kamala gave a slight nod, her focus shifting toward the galley door where Emily had disappeared. The tension hinted at a confrontation brewing just beneath the surface, one she knew was far from over. As the plane continued its journey, Kamala could feel the weight of the cabin's collective attention pressing on her. The whispers of Sarah's warning combined with Emily's escalating hostility pointed to something larger at play. Kamala leaned back, scanning her surroundings with quiet intensity. What should have been a peaceful journey was morphing into an unexpected test of her resolve. The turbulence outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing within the cabin. Emily's actions weren't just unprofessional, they felt deliberate, even sinister. Kamala knew she needed to stay vigilant. When Emily reappeared, she wasn't carrying a tray but a small file folder. Her steps were deliberate, her expression a mask of scrutiny as she approached Kamala once more. Arms crossed, Emily stood over Kamala Harris, her voice feigning politeness but brimming with menace. "Mrs. Harris, I need to see your booking documents. It's essential we confirm that all passengers are properly vetted." Nearby passengers exchanged uneasy glances, while Sarah, a lawyer seated close to Kamala, leaned forward, gripping her armrest as if preparing to intervene. Kamala placed her book down calmly and met Emily's gaze with an unflinching expression. "Miss, I provided my documentation when I boarded, and it was verified. If you need further clarification, I can have my office contact the airline directly." Emily smirked, her tone dropping but loud enough for others to hear. "Oh, there's no need for that. This is just a standard procedure for flight safety. I'm sure you understand, not everyone belongs everywhere." A ripple of shock moved through the cabin. Heads turned, curiosity and discomfort written across the passengers' faces. Sarah couldn't stay silent. Rising abruptly, she spoke with authority. "Miss, this is not standard procedure. This is blatant discrimination. Mrs. Harris has done nothing wrong, and you do not have the authority to treat her this way." Emily turned sharply to Sarah, her eyes blazing. "Ma'am, this does not concern you. We're ensuring the safety of everyone on board." Sarah didn't back down. "As a human rights attorney, I know exactly what rights passengers have. Your actions violate Mrs. Harris's rights and damage this airline's reputation." Emily, visibly unsettled, turned and stormed back to the galley. Moments later, the pilot's voice broke the tension over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to technical reasons, we will be making an emergency landing. Please remain calm and follow crew instructions." Kamala's gaze narrowed, suspicion brewing. The timing felt far too convenient. As the plane descended toward a small, isolated airport, Emily reappeared, her expression colder than ever. She approached Kamala with undisguised hostility. "Mrs. Harris, you will need to pack your belongings. Upon landing, you are required to disembark immediately." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Sarah stood again, her voice ringing out. "You have no right to remove her without cause. This is an abuse of power." Emily turned on Sarah, pointing sharply. "Stay out of this. It doesn't concern you." "It concerns everyone here," Sarah countered. "Your actions are discriminatory and unacceptable." Passengers began murmuring in agreement. An older man near the front spoke up, "She hasn't done anything wrong. You're out of line." Despite the growing disapproval, Emily remained resolute. When the plane landed, Kamala gathered her belongings and disembarked under Emily's cold gaze. Sarah followed her to the door. "I'll testify for you," she said firmly. "This cannot go unchallenged." Kamala nodded, her expression one of quiet determination. "Thank you. They won't get away with this." As the plane taxied away, Kamala stood alone on the empty runway, the heat radiating off the asphalt amplifying her feelings of isolation. Yet, beneath the surface, a resolve burned. This wasn't over. The truth would come to light, and those responsible would face justice. Dragging her suitcase behind her, Kamala made her way to the rundown airport building, its cracked walls and dusty windows mirroring the isolation of the tarmac. Inside, she found a neglected space with worn-out chairs, cobwebbed desks, and scattered papers. An old phone on the reception desk offered brief hope, but the static hum of a dead line dashed it. Her cell phone, too, displayed the same cold message, "No service." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Kamala knew she couldn't stay in the unsecured, desolate airport overnight. Grabbing a flashlight she found in the office, she ventured down a narrow, shadowy path leading into the woods. The eerie rustling of leaves and an occasional faint sound behind her heightened her unease, but she pressed forward until a distant light broke through the darkness. Reaching the edge of a small village, Kamala was met with warmth and curiosity. A kind man offered her shelter, while villagers provided food and tended to her scratches. That evening, a young girl named Asha recognized her, eyes shining with admiration. Kamala reassured her, instilling hope and strength. As Kamala lay on a simple bed that night, her mind churned over the events, a suspicious landing, Emily's hostility, and the unfolding mystery. Morning arrived with the serenity of village life, yet her resolve was sharper than ever. The village chief informed her of a contact in a nearby town who could help her reconnect with the world. Smiling with gratitude, Kamala prepared to continue her journey, determined to seek justice and uncover the truth behind the deliberate acts against her. This story follows Kamala Harris as she overcomes a humiliating and unjust incident on a flight to the Maldives, where she was targeted, insulted, and removed from the plane under false pretenses. After finding refuge in a small village and reconnecting with her office, Kamala begins a relentless fight for justice, determined to hold the airline accountable for its discriminatory actions. With the support of witnesses, viral social media attention, and her legal team, Kamala uncovers a deeper conspiracy involving political motives and systemic abuse of power by an airline executive. Her press conference galvanizes public outrage and sparks a broader movement against discrimination, symbolized by the trending hashtag Justice for Kamala. The story highlights Kamala's resilience and resolve, not just to restore her own dignity but to advocate for systemic change, ensuring no one else endures similar injustice. It becomes a national fight for accountability, fairness, and human rights. Kamala Harris's lawsuit against the airline culminated in a high-profile trial that captured national attention. Evidence, including a passenger's video and damning testimony from a fellow flight attendant, revealed an orchestrated plan by the airline's executives to target Kamala. Witnesses, such as Sarah and other passengers, testified to the blatant discrimination and abuse of power. The jury quickly delivered a guilty verdict against Emily and the airline, resulting in a substantial fine, mandated reforms, and further investigations into the executives involved. As Kamala addressed a cheering crowd outside the courthouse, her victory became a rallying cry against injustice and discrimination, inspiring millions. The case marked a turning point, not just for Kamala's career, but for the broader fight for equality and accountability. Kamala Harris's court victory became a catalyst for widespread change. Determined not to let it end as a personal triumph, she launched a nonprofit, Justice for All, to combat discrimination, educate the public, and provide legal support. Public support surged as her story inspired many to share their own experiences of injustice. Through media appearances and policy advocacy, Kamala pushed for systemic reforms, including anti-discrimination laws and improved protections across industries. The airline involved faced severe consequences, including executive dismissals and policy overhauls, as other companies followed suit. At the launch of her nonprofit, Kamala delivered a powerful speech emphasizing equality and collective responsibility, earning widespread applause. Her impact reached individuals like Asha, a young girl inspired to become a lawyer, continuing Kamala's legacy of fighting for justice. Reflecting on her journey, Kamala knew this was just the beginning of a broader movement for fairness and dignity for all. Kamala Harris's courtroom triumph became a global symbol of justice and equality, inspiring millions. Transforming her victory into action, she founded Justice for All, a nonprofit providing legal support, advocating for policy change, and educating communities about their rights. Her team, inundated with thousands of requests for help, prioritized urgent cases, amplifying their impact nationwide. Through forums, partnerships, and legislative advising, Kamala championed systemic reforms, including the proposed Comprehensive Fairness Act to combat discrimination. Her efforts reached individuals globally, empowering many to fight against injustice. Stories of change, like that of a young woman in India inspired by Kamala, fueled her determination. At an event honoring her as a justice trailblazer, Kamala reminded the world, "This fight isn't just about me, it's about every voice demanding fairness. Together, we're building a future of equality." Her journey, though challenging, had only just begun. Kamala Harris transformed her personal fight for justice into a global movement for equality. From achieving courtroom victories to addressing the UN Human Rights Summit, she became a powerful advocate for the marginalized, inspiring countless people around the world. Her organization, Justice for All, grew into an international force, fostering collaboration, advancing landmark legislation, and offering legal aid and education. Through initiatives such as the Global Justice Network and her best-selling book Light in the Darkness, Kamala empowered communities and drove systemic change. Her relentless efforts culminated in the passage of the Comprehensive Justice Act, cementing her legacy as a tireless champion of fairness. One late night, as she read a heartfelt letter from a young admirer, Kamala reflected on her journey. The fight for justice was far from complete, but she believed that with perseverance and unity, meaningful change was possible. Her story continues to inspire, reminding everyone that even small actions can illuminate the path toward a fairer and more just future.